In the minds of most people, the nuclear bomb is something vague, lacking a clear definition. On one hand, it symbolizes destructive power, and on the other, many cite Hiroshima as an example where life returned to normal several decades after the explosion. But don't worry, we will now clarify the situation and estimate what would happen if we detonated all the bombs on the planet at once. Are the scenarios we see in computer games possible in reality, or is the entire nuclear threat merely propaganda? We'll find out here and now, right after your comment on whether you support or oppose nuclear weapons. Because no matter how you look at it, there are many, far too many nuclear bombs on Earth. According to the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, there are 70,300 of these munitions on the planet. To put this in perspective, there are just over 300 cities worldwide with populations exceeding 1 million. In Russia, according to the census, only 171 cities have populations exceeding 100,000, while the United States boasts 300 such cities. By simple mathematics, one can deduce that the available nuclear weapons are easily sufficient to wipe entire countries off the face of the planet, regardless of their size and population. The country with the largest stockpile, according to the same organization, is Russia, with 8,500 warheads. The United States closely follows with 7,700 warheads. Other countries have far fewer, with France having 300 warheads, China 250, and the United Kingdom possessing 225. In total, nuclear weapons are in the arsenals of 9 countries. Some argue that this maintains a balance of power, while others vehemently oppose nuclear weapons. Despite loud statements, there have been no real actions to reduce this arsenal, contrary to what's stated in Wikipedia. Only old and unwanted bombs are decommissioned. Statistics can be manipulated, and military reports often present figures convenient for their purposes. It is only independent organizations whose figures we trust. Speaking of the arsenal, nuclear bombs come in various forms in terms of tonnage, delivery methods, types of impact, and killing power. There are weapons for all scenarios: submarines, aircraft, cannons, and missiles. Military forces employ them all. The killing power of these weapons is only limited by the specific target. Scientists once realized that bombs were less effective against individuals not caught in the immediate blast. Radiation takes time to have an impact, which is largely irrelevant on the battlefield. Therefore, they developed neutron bombs, capable of emitting radiation 13 times stronger than lethal levels. Interesting, isn't it? But let's not delve into the classification of these weapons. Instead, let's focus on the facts. Let's travel back to 1945 and recall the first use of the horrifying nuclear weapon in combat conditions. Or rather, not precisely in combat conditions. The Americans dropped 2 warheads on ordinary cities without much consideration. Their reasoning was that Hiroshima had a military port and Nagasaki had weapons factories. They aimed to achieve maximum psychological impact, counting on the geographical locations of the cities to amplify the effects of the explosions. Approximately 500,000 ordinary residents in these 2 cities were forgotten by the US. For those who reference photos of the modern and technologically advanced Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it's essential to clarify that the recovery of these cities wasn't due to the weakness of the bombs, but the exceptional resilience and ingenuity of the Japanese. In essence, they are entirely new cities that have retained only their historical names. Instead of lengthy explanations, comparing photos of the areas before and after the explosions would suffice. Cities were reduced to rubble, along with all the people within a 1-mile radius of the blasts. Remember, we mentioned nearly 500,000 people before the bombings. Official figures claim that half of them perished, and most of the survivors suffered from radiation sickness. You can search to learn more about what that entails. You'll realize that everyone affected was a victim. Furthermore, it's important to note that the destructive power of those bombs pales in comparison to modern ones. Modern bombs are nearly 3,000 times more potent. The Tsar Bomba, recorded in the Guinness Book of World Records, generated a mushroom cloud that reached an altitude of 41 miles, almost reaching outer space. The fireball it created had a diameter of 15,000 feet, which is 1/5 the size of Los Angeles. And that's only the fireball. The bomb's thermal radiation could cause third-degree burns at a distance of 62 miles. Witnesses felt the blast from 620 miles away.
This video is brought to you by Thorum. Take a look at this rings. They have rings made from 4-billion-year-old Gibeon meteorite and genuine 65-million-year-old T-Rex bone. If you are a fan of Vikings, they have Odin ring, the Norse god of war, the Thor ring, and all of them are crafted by hand. Head the link in the comments and use promo code LIVINGHISTORY to get 20% off a truly unique ring.
Consider estimating the radius of the continuous impact zone of such a bomb if, for example, it were detonated over Paris. The implication is that there would be nothing left alive within that zone. While not all modern bombs are as powerful as the Tsar Bomba, there are tens of thousands of them. Now let's get to the point. What would happen if all these bombs were detonated? The complexity of the matter lies in political considerations. This is why you can find varying opinions on the internet. Some argue that hundreds of missiles would be needed to regress to the Middle Ages, while others claim that even detonating 50,000 bombs would not lead to significant consequences. Advocates of nuclear weapons promote a less catastrophic scenario, while opponents argue the opposite. So, who's correct? Both common sense, dry statistics on the health issues of people living near nuclear weapons test sites, and basic mathematics are on the side of those who foresee dire consequences, and 5,000 cities on Earth with a population of over 100,000 people. That's less than 3 times the available stockpile of weapons, even without deducting the damage to nature. That's at least half the world's population lost. Looking for specifics? Certainly. If we rely on official statistics, the average warhead is roughly 200 kilotons. To put this in perspective, one of the most devastating disasters in human history, the Krakatoa eruption, had an estimated potential of 200 megatons. If we multiply our 200 kiloton average by the 15,000 to 20,000 warheads available, we arrive at an energy equivalent of 15 to 20 times the impact of the Krakatoa eruption. For a moment, let's consider the eruption of a volcano situated at a considerable distance from densely populated areas. This volcanic event caused significant devastation to the surrounding island, triggering a tsunami that reached a staggering height of 120 feet. The shock wave from the eruption reverberated around the globe multiple times. Additionally, the volcano ejected an immense volume of ash into the atmosphere, which had visible effects across the planet for several years. In comparison, the consequences of nuclear bombs are even more catastrophic. According to studies, the deployment of hundreds of warheads can lead to the destruction of half of the ozone layer in the affected regions. When you multiply this figure by 15, you arrive at a staggering number of cancer cases on a global scale. And then, there's the matter of temperature change. The nuclear winter that has been discussed in propaganda is indeed a plausible scenario. A slight decrease in the planet's average temperature by 5-6 degrees could push humanity back into a state reminiscent of the Middle Ages, causing widespread famine. However, human resilience is remarkable. The planet itself will not veer off its orbit or disintegrate, but the closest predictions of the consequences of a large-scale nuclear conflict were made by game developers. In such a scenario, half of the world's population would perish, and the surviving half would contend with the dual challenges of cancer and famine. Add to this the extensive damage to infrastructure, technology, and production, and you end up with a world resembling the desolate landscape depicted in the game Stalker that covers most of the planet's territory. The somber conclusion of this narrative is that when you search the phrase, "How many nuclear weapons?" on Google, the most popular queries tend to focus on specific countries rather than addressing the global perspective. Despite millennia of progress, war, and the shedding of blood, humanity appears to have learned little. We continue to draw arbitrary borders between nations and are sometimes willing to take lives solely because individuals were not born in close proximity to us. In reality, a simple farmer from Indonesia may have more in common with you than a person born in the same hospital but on the adjacent bed. Until humanity recognizes that we share far more similarities than politicians often suggest, meaningful change may remain elusive. Instead of advancing, we find ourselves speculating on the potential scale of an apocalypse, unrelated to external factors. Rather than moving forward, We stockpile our metaphorical clubs and regard one another with anger. The only dilemma is that there is no satisfactory answer to the fundamental question: why?